660 AM The Answer. 660 AMTheAnswer.com.
More of Ladies Can We Talk with Debbie Georgatos, right here on 660 AM The Answer.
Hello and welcome back to Ladies Can We Talk. We are just getting warmed up. Our show is 2 hours every Sunday evening, and just very, very glad that you're tuned in tonight. You know, we've been talking in the last segment. I want to correct one thing. There was a guy in Seattle who actually, Seattle CEO, who decided that the way he was going to address his concern about minimum wage and thinking people didn't get paid enough was to say that that every employee in his company would get $70,000 a year. It wasn't an hourly rate. He said it was $70,000 a year. And it was kind of a way to fight income inequality. What he soon discovered is the laws of economics caught up with him almost instantly. He lost two of his top employees, which is just kind of staggering to think about. Lost two of his employees who just said, hey, wait a minute, you're paying them. You're paying them what you almost what I pay, and I am a professional. So he lost people. He ended up losing money, and he's kind of had to come around. He doesn't want to admit it, but what he really needs to admit is socialist ideas, even in the form of, raising minimum wage to absurd levels, even having a minimum wage is a question. But, and I guess the last point I want to be sure to say is it really is important to understand the politicians who get in your face and get in America's face and say, I stand for the little guy, I stand up for you, I'm going to defend you. These are people who know what I just told you. They know socialism doesn't work. They know raising the minimum wage does not help. In fact, it hurts poor people. And they say it anyway because they think you won't understand. So I went a little long enough. I want to be sure to finish that point. And now we're going to turn and talk to a friend of this show. She's actually Clare Lopez was on this show, actually, when we used to be on for an hour on Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. She called in at one of the very, very early shows and very early in the day. And so appreciate her coming back. And Clare, are you there?
Yeah. Hi, Debbie. Glad to be with you.
Hi, Clare. Glad to have you. Well, we've talked on this show many times about, and I gave them some of your background before our break, but we talked on the show many times about the dangers of Islamic terrorism in various places in the world, and certainly abroad we have a lot going on. But we talked in the show about this civilization jihad idea that things are happening within America, and they're not is not Islamic terrorism in the military form that is we see around the world, but it's more insidious and hidden. And I know your organization, Center for Security Policy, tries to draw attention to that. So I guess if you wouldn't mind to start with, can you just tell us just basically in what form you see this kind of civilization jihad happening in America?
Sure. Well, the term itself, civilization jihad, comes from the Muslim Brotherhood. Of course, a jihadist organization formed in Egypt back in 1928 and dedicated to two things: the reestablishment of the caliphate, which at that time had been abolished, and the enforcement of Sharia globally. So that's all they want, just Sharia and caliphate. But they made the move to the United States after World War II. And subsequently, over the intervening decades, set up literally thousands of front organizations. One of the most prominent of these, of course, is CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, which in fact is the U.S. branch of Hamas itself, the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as many other leading top Muslim organizations in the country, like the Islamic Society of North America, the Islamic Circle of North America, North American Islamic Trust that holds the deeds of trust to many, many American mosques and Islamic centers. So that's the organization we're talking about. And back in 2008, there was a landmark terror financing case tried by the Department of Justice against the Holy Land Foundation, headquartered then in Texas. And this organization put itself forward as a charity, but in fact had been channeling millions of dollars to Hamas on the foreign terrorist organizations list of the Department of State. And so the case was brought, the Department of Justice prosecuted, they won the case, And part of the reason they won it was that they had access to a cache of documents. Back in 2004, the FBI had raided the home of a top American Muslim brother by the name of Ismail al-Baraseh. He had a townhouse in Annandale, Virginia. They raided the house. They found the archives of the Muslim Brotherhood in America. Among those was a document called the Explanatory Memorandum, for short. And this document explained what the Muslim Brotherhood was doing in the United States. It was kind of a report from the American branch of the Brotherhood back to the mothership in Egypt. And in this document is the phrase that you used. It says in the document that the Ikhwan, that is the Brotherhood, must understand that their work in America is like a grand jihad to destroy the Western civilization from within and sabotage its miserable house by their hands, meaning ours, we're going to do it to ourselves, until the religion of God is made supreme over all other, victorious over all other religions. So that's where the phrase comes from. A Muslim Brotherhood document submitted as evidence, uncontested, by the way, in the trial. So it's an official document, both by the Brotherhood and, of course, by the Department of Justice. And the civilization jihad refers to that process of insidious infiltration, subversion of the American society, government, academia, media, law, courts, from within. In other words, like you were saying before, Debbie, not a frontal assault, a military assault like you see the Islamic State doing, or the, Al-Qaeda's attacks, blowing things up and killing people, but rather infiltrating within and into a society almost under the radar so that it is corroded from within, stripped of its own principles and values and traditions, and laid open to the advance of Sharia, of Islamic law.
Wow. We are talking with Clare Lopez of the Center for Security Policy, and that was a great background. I'm going to listen to that and try to memorize that. That was very, very good. I want to jump forward, though, right now, because, Clare, there was this thing that happened in Washington last week, and I actually got just a week ago today, and hours before my show, calls from several people saying, hey, are you tuned in to what's happening in Washington with this H.R. 2899? And it was a bill introduced in Congress to essentially propose a creation of the Office for Countering Violent Extremism within the Department of Homeland Security. And I know you, among others, were opposed to that. So what's the problem with that law?
Sure. Well, this is a law that is proposed by Representative Mike McCall, who is the chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security. And his bill proposes the establishment, as you say, of an Office of Countering Violent Extremism within the Department of Homeland Security. Now, within DHS already since 2010, there exists a working group for countering violent extremism, and this would make a full-fledged office, which is a much bigger official status for this group within the department. It would be headed by an assistant secretary of DHS. It would be funded with $10 million per year between 2016 and 2020. And here's the problem, as I see it in any case. The term itself, countering violent extremism, sounds great, kind of, for people who are just sort of, listening in on this, but haven't done a whole lot of research and background on it. But the term itself was actually created by the Muslim Brotherhood. Here we come back to that subversion and infiltration. Information operations is the way, from an intelligence perspective, we might call this. Here's what happened. Back during the George W. Bush administration of the 2000s, in the middle 2000s, gradually the Muslim Brotherhood organizations that had already infiltrated our government, in particular Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, Department of State, began to urge the leadership of our national security to stop using words that were accurately descriptive of Islamic terrorism. They said, if you call it Islam or Muslim terrorism or jihad or caliphate, we'll be offended. So please stop using those words. And the George W. Bush administration said, okay. And they started to take these words out of their official documents. They removed them. They stripped them out of the documents. And then in their place, the second phase happened, and that was the imposition, the beginning of the use of this term, violent extremism, which means precisely nothing. I happen to think that Bodie Miller is a violently extreme downhill skier. But that's not what they're talking about, is it? Not really, or how do we know? How do we know? What's violent extremism? It means precisely nothing, and that's the whole point. So you take away the accurate descriptor words. In their place, you put an anodyne, meaningless term like violent extremism. It's empty. And then into it, you pour all the meaning that is preferred. Now, what is preferred? We've seen the Department of Homeland Security come out with warning advisories to local law enforcement and so forth around the country that actually say that warn them to be on the lookout for violent extremists who support Second Amendment, gun rights, who oppose abortion, who are perhaps returning veterans. So you see what they're doing. It was a three-step process. Strip out the words that accurately describe the enemy we face, the forces of Islamic Jihad. That's what we're facing, the global jihad movement. Took that all away. Then they put this anodyne, meaningless term in its place, and now they're filling that term with their own meaning, which is completely, totally 180 degrees removed from the actual threat that faces us. And again, that is Islamic Jihad and the ideology of Sharia.
We're talking with Clare Lopez from the Center for Security Policy. Clare, that was such a great summary. And I really, last week, as I mentioned right before the show, people were calling saying, you got to talk about this. And I talked a little bit about it, but to summarize, because we kind of went a little bit long in the segment, but we're talking about the idea that the Islamic movement here in America, this subtle civilization jihad movement, is pushing American officials, really, to remove from reference in their terror training manuals and other places reference to Islam as the problem, substituting the term countering violent extremism, the CVE term, and then CVE is going to be used to refer to basically political opponents of the government, people that are protesting or standing up for things the government doesn't agree with. That is.
And now think about this. Since 2010, when the working group on countering violent extremism was first established inside of the Department of Homeland Security, among the advisors to that working group are some of the top members of the Muslim Brotherhood in America, including the Imam Mohammed Majid, formerly the president of ISNA, Islamic Society of North America Muslim Brotherhood Front Group, and an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation Hamas terror funding trial, plus Mohammed Eli Bieri, another associate of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. So this is who's on the inside already and working on this and making sure that what we're calling the Great Purge, and what you just said was exactly right, Debbie, that between 2011 and 2012, the entire United States government stripped its training curriculum. Department of State, Department of Justice, Department of Defense, the entire U.S. military, the entire intelligence community, Department of Homeland Security, on, took out presentations, PowerPoints, anything that accurately describe the enemy we face, the global jihad movement, the jihadis of Islamic terrorism, taken out, removed, and the instructors blackballed who used to teach those things, so that never again would anyone in the U.S. government be exposed to truthful understanding and information about the enemy. Now, if you can't even describe and name the enemy you fight, there's no chance that we can formulate or execute an effective plan to defeat that enemy. And that's the whole point.
Wow, Clare, that was, I really appreciate your calling in tonight. I appreciate all that information. Can you quick tell our listeners a website they can go to for Center for Security Policy?
Sure. It is centerforsecuritypolicy.org. and you will find a wealth of information there, articles, and many other resources. centerforsecuritypolicy.org.
Clare Lopez, thank you so very much for calling into Ladies Can We Talk? And we're going to zip off to our break, and we're going to come back with about 3 minutes to talk. But that's okay. I really want to urge you to go to that website. What Claire is talking about, that website's full of information. Claire is a internationally recognized expert. Thank you for calling in, and come on back after the break to Ladies Can We Talk on 660 AM, The Answer.